All right. Thank you all for coming out to our Healthy Bones class today. This is a kitchen class, so we'll be doing a little bit of cooking, but we're also going to be taking note of ingredients and different nutrients that play a role in that bone health. So some of the big ones we're going to be going through today is protein, magnesium, potassium, calcium, as well as vitamin K. And if you guys have any questions along the way, this is a smaller group today, so feel free to drop your mic on and say hello and ask questions along the way, or you can drop it in the chat and I'll get to it later on. And then, yeah, so it seems like some of you guys are going to be cooking with us today. If not, feel free to utilize these recipes. I'm going to give you access to a whole portal that's going to have a few meal plans for you to check out and recipes that are really high in calcium. You're going to have high potassium and magnesium content in those as well. And they're going to go right along with the things that you're going to be learning today about your bone health. So most of you seem to be over 18 at this point. So, a lot of your bone mineral density has already started to solidify in your body. So by the age of 18, about 95% of your bone mineral density has been set. But after about 30 years of age, that is going to be your peak bone mass. And after that, we start to have a natural decline in bone mineral density over time. So what we really want to make sure that we're doing is utilizing the nutrition that we're consuming to help bolster that and provide our body with the nutrients it needs so that it doesn't need to leach from that bone even more and expedite that natural degradation of bone over time. So we really want to be able to support it with the nutrition and reduce anything that is going to really exacerbate that bone loss over time. How many of you have any concerns about bone health, family history, maybe you broke a bone before?
Yeah, broken bones.
So did I.
Yeah? What'd you guys break?
Broken my wrist, my collarbone, and
For me, just my my right fat toe. So it was actually in a conference room. The table fell down and I couldn't move my foot fast enough. So he actually broke it just like this much. Very, very little.
Okay. Well, at least it's not like a stress fracture, but still incredibly painful. I broke my collarbone once and that was terrible. Thankfully, the only bone I've broken. So today we're going to be cooking butternut squash and kale sauté. I'm going to add a few ingredients to this that is going to help to increase the nutrient density of it and support that bone mass even more and just make it a complete meal without having to do a lot of extra bells and whistles. And then the second thing we're going to make is a pomegranate, pistachio, and tahini oatmeal. So what I love about this dish is it has a lot of fun flavors to it. It's a little bit more unique. So if you're kind of over your same song and dance for breakfast, this is a really great one to integrate. But feel free to make it your own. So you could have walnuts instead of the pistachios. Maybe you're doing raspberries or strawberries instead of the pomegranates. So we'll kind of get a little bit deeper into that as we're going along. But the first thing we're going to start off with is getting this saute started. So this is going to be our most time consuming one to create. So we're going to start there. And bear with me as I get my camera angle set up here. All right. So I have this nice big cast iron. You can do a stainless steel or something that is a non-toxic enamel, if you will. But we're just going to use cast iron here. I personally really love cast irons. I'm going to crouch down here just for the flavor and the iron content with it. And then I'll be making the oatmeal on the stovetop in the directions it uses a microwave. I just really like using a stovetop just to have a little bit more mindfulness with the foods that I cook. So we're going to get there. Any questions so far as we're getting into it? All right. So first things first, we're going to be doing adding a little bit of avocado oil to our pan. So whoops. The reason why I'm using avocado oil is it's a high heat option. So this is really going to help reduce any free radical creation. If we're heating up olive oil to the point where it starts to smoke, we're going to see that fat molecule actually start to change, and that can actually have a toxic byproduct from it. You guys still see me? All right, sorry. So we're gonna do this over medium-high heat, and I'm gonna try and teach and educate and cook all at the same time. So we'll see how this goes. So medium heat, just kind of getting that up and running. And then while that's heating up, I'm gonna go ahead and cut up my butternut squash. Actually, I'm gonna hold on heating that, but I'm gonna cut up my butternut squash and get that up to speed. So the reason why we want to do squash in this case is to help increase the vitamin K content and some vitamin C in here. So that's right there. Let's see, pardon my camera angles here. I'm gonna, all right. You guys see that all right?
Yep.
Okay. Okay, so have you guys ever cooked with a butternut squash? No? Okay. So we really want to make sure that the squash is nice and clean before we cut it. And you want to make sure you're using a very sharp knife. I'm going to do it from the side, actually. The sharper the knife, the better, because if it's not very sharp, it's going to really increase your risk of cutting your hands. You want to make sure it's very sharp. Oh, goodness. I'm going to get a cameraman at some point. So throughout the day, you want to make sure that you're consuming calcium from different calcium-rich foods. So a lot of times when we think about calcium, we think about dairy products, but you also should really take into consideration leafy greens as what like kale, collard, spinach, and broccoli, particularly ones from the more cruciferous families like that kale and things like Brussels sprouts and broccoli, because they're going to have a lower oxalate content. So oxalates can actually inhibit some of that calcium absorption. So if you've ever eaten spinach and you kind of have that that squeaky film on your teeth, that's the oxalates that are present. So it's not necessarily that they're bad for you, but it does inhibit the absorption. So really focusing on the kale, collards family is going to help to increase that absorption. Other foods that are going to be rich in calcium are going to be things like almonds or beans or legumes, as well as your fortified milks or regular cow's milk. And then last but not least is sardines. These are going to be really great. Not only are they going to have a high calcium content, but they're going to be one of the few food sources that actually contain vitamin D outside of mushrooms. So a lot of us get vitamin D from the sun. These days, we're very conscious about protecting our skin and slathering on sunscreen. So really making sure that you're maximizing the amount of vitamin D that you're getting from your food sources with those fatty fish is important. Sardines have about 430 milligrams in 3 ounces of calcium. You want 500 milligrams per serving, so per meal throughout the day, so that you make up about 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams, depending on where you are in the age cycle. If you're younger, and really building that bone mass, you want closer to 1,200 milligrams, but for all of you on the call today, 1,000 milligrams is going to be adequate. But again, you want to break it up throughout the day. So your body can only absorb about 500 milligrams in one sitting. So that looks like the 3 ounces of sardines, a cup of cooked kale is going to be around 300 milligrams. In this recipe, we have the cooked kale as well as the as well as the almond milk and the oatmeal and the Greek yogurt and oats. So the almond milk is going to give us about 300 milligrams. Oats are 200 milligrams. So if you wanted to keep the breakfast style one vegan, you can totally do that and still hit 500 milligrams very easily. If you want to add on the Greek yogurt, that's going to give you another 500 milligrams, which is awesome. And you're really going to be able to hit that target there. Right. So back to cutting up the butternut squash here. I went ahead and cut off the ends, and then I'm going to cut this in half, just like this. Again, this is where having that nice sharp knife is going to be really, really helpful. And so we have a nice flat surface to work with. If you have a vegetable peeler, you can simply peel this off very easily, but I just use my knife. Keeps it very simple. So another nutrient that isn't talked about as much when it comes to bone health is your protein intake. So protein is really important, not only for building lean muscle mass and preserving that lean muscle mass, keeping your metabolism high, but it's also going to act as the scaffolding for your bone. So it really helps to build that bone matrix, which your bones are formed on. And especially as people age, their need for protein actually increases, but oftentimes their intake decreases because they have a lower appetite. So focusing on that high protein intake is going to help preserve that lean muscle mass and that bone mass over time. In addition, really practicing regularity with that strength training, from doing, body weight workouts to actually weighted workouts. You can do resistance bands. That really makes a big difference when it comes to preserving that bone mass and lean muscle mass. If you look at bone density scans for people who are overweight versus people who are, of normal weight or underweight, people who are overweight or obese actually have more bone mineral density, and that's because they're carrying around more weight throughout the day. So think about if you're wearing like a weighted backpack, you're constantly weight training. So it's a beautiful thing in that way to be able to preserve lean your bone mineral density. All right, so this butternut squash is about done getting all cleaned up here. And so I'm just going to chop this kind of bulbous bottom in half and scoop out the seeds. Very simple. Get a spoon here. I'm just going to scoop out the seed. See if I can get a little bit better angle for you guys. All right, yep, just scooping out the seeds here. David, how's it coming with your butternut squash?
I used an ice cream scooper, so I got a lot of the seeds out.
Right. And you can actually keep these seeds and roast them, but I'm not going to today. And you really want to try and get as much of the slimy strings in here out as you can, because they don't always come out great when you roast it. You can do this with other types of squash too. So like there's acorn squash or some smaller, like we got these little honey nut squashes that would be great in this recipe. So you can really play around and have some different flavors in there. But what we really want to keep is that kale element in this dish. So that's pretty important. You can incorporate some quinoa in it, or add sesame seeds for more flavor too, which we'll be doing at the end. So we're just scooping out the seeds in this butternut squash. And then we'll dice it up and get it cooking there. So for those who tend to use the salt shaker liberally, this is one thing that you want to be very mindful about, especially if you already have low calcium content in your diet. Too much salt is actually going to leach calcium from your bones, and it's going to, again, cause that bone mineral density to decrease over time. So really being mindful about your sodium intake, unless you're actively sweating a lot and you have low blood pressure or normal blood pressure, being mindful about how you're using sodium throughout the day is going to help to better your bone mineral density over time. Because a high salt diet causes the body to leach that calcium from the bones to maintain the balance in your bloodstream. So it's actually going to excrete calcium through the urine as it's being excessively, if you have an excessive intake of salt.
If you, Ellie, if you cook with kosher salt, does that decrease the amount of salt you consume? I mean,
So
with?
go ahead.
Yeah, kosher salt, is that better to use when you cook?
So salt is salt at the end of the day. Kosher salt's typically a bigger molecule. So it's a bigger grain. So sometimes you use a little bit less, but I would just be mindful about the amount of salt that you're taking in. So you want like just a very small sprinkle of it. I would add it at the end of a dish that you're making. But yeah, I would watch the salt intake on that. All right, and then get you a better angle here. And then I'm just continuing to chop this up into little bite-sized chunks here. And then we're gonna turn our pan on here shortly and get these roasting. So I'm again just putting it back on medium-high heat. And I'm gonna try and not to sweat with these Santa Ana winds. Again, when you're cooking with something big, or you're using your knife with a larger component here, you really want flat surfaces to work on. So if you have like squash that's rolling around, that's really where you're going to increase your chances of cutting yourself. So working with flat surfaces. So I just cut these down middle way, and I'm going to make some long cuts, and then I'll cut them into those half-inch, inch-sized chunks so we can roast them. Let's see. So when it comes to magnesium, that's another one that people are that is important to be mindful about when it comes to bone health. So half of your body's magnesium content is actually stored in your bones. So if you're not getting adequate amounts in your diet on a regular basis, the body, again, just like calcium, is going to leach that magnesium from the bones. And that's where you're going to see that bone degradation start to increase. So the recommended daily allowance for bone for the average public is between 320 and 450 milligrams. For people, older than 70, typically 70 to 80% are not getting enough, and arguably most people aren't getting enough these days. As we see our diets start to focus more on animal products and less on our fruits and vegetables. Foods that are going to contain magnesium are going to be your dark leafy greens, dark leafy green vegetables of all kinds this time, not just the kale or cruciferous types. We're also thinking about peas, beans, lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds, as well as your milk products. We really want to focus on increasing the density of vegetables and fruit in the diet. This is going to really help to reduce acidity in the body. Too much acidity in your body from a lot of animal foods or processed foods, it's going to require your body to leach minerals from your bones again. Whoops. is going to require your body to leach minerals from the bones, and that's really going to be a lot harder on your body. So focusing on foods that are going to balance your blood pH, so those the leafy greens, vegetables, you're going to want 8 cups of vegetables or fruit per day. So ideally 5 to 6 cups of vegetables and fill the rest in with fruit. And so this is a little quart here, and it's a 2-cup quart. So this means you would need 4 of these to hit your daily value for fruits and vegetables per day. So this is pretty aggressive for some people, but simply thinking about foods that are cooked or raw, you can incorporate them into soups or stews, smoothies, having them in a sauté like this, and that's going to help you really hit that target that you're looking to hit. So I'm going to go ahead and lower this here so you can see. I'm going to put this into our pan. It's nice and hot. It's probably going to give me a good sizzle. Great. So we have a butternut squash going there. And then I'm just going to put a top on this so it'll steam a little bit and get that going very well. So while that's cooking, I'm going to finish my kale. So kale, again, is a great source of vitamin K. You're going to get your potassium and magnesium from it. Let me get some, okay, right there. So things like kale is going to have your vitamin K1. So K1 gets converted into vitamin K2, which is the bioavailable source in the body. So that's really important for people who are struggling with their digestion. That conversion rate really depends on how healthy your gut microbiome is. So, what kind of bacteria does your gut have? How much is it producing? If you have trouble with digestion, such as constipation, diarrhea, maybe you're having SIBO symptoms, or maybe you have celiac disease, really being aware of your gut microbiome and how we can build up the health of that is going to help you better absorb things like vitamin K from your leafy greens. Other more biologically available sources of vitamin K are going to be fermented foods. So this could be kimchi, sauerkraut, miso, yogurt, eggs, not fermented, but just eggs in general are going to have K2. And then your dairy foods overall are going to have vitamin K2. I highly recommend going for a grass-fed dairy because animals that have consumed grass, that's where you're going to get a lot of that K2 in. So think about like grass-fed meats or chickens that have been allowed to free range. They're going to have a higher amount of K2 available in their products. So really thinking about the quality of where you're sourcing your food from, the soil that they're grown in to the diet that they're having. We are what we eat, and we are what we eats, if you know what I mean. So really paying attention to that. If you're having eggs or meat that's had a really high inflammatory diet, then that's going to increase the inflammation in your body as well. It's another reason why sardines, since they're lower on the food chain, they haven't had a lot of eating what other things eat. They're eating a lot of nutrients from the ocean as well as grasses and things like that. So they're going to have a lot less toxicity and inflammation chance. But again, you're going to have a lot of great vitamin D and calcium content from the bones that are naturally occurring in it. So with this kale, we're just going to cut some ribbons. We're going to cut ribbons, and then I'm just going to put it in a salad spinner to dry it off. These big inch-long ribbons. I really like this dinosaur kale because It's a little less aggressive than your other kale that you'll find in the store. So this is a salad spinner. If you haven't seen it, you can go to almost any thrift store and find them pretty easily. But I love it because it saves me a lot of time, and I can quickly use that salad and get it going for the dish that I'm creating. Okay. So I'm going to add a little bit of salt, pepper, cinnamon, or excuse me, chili powder to our squash here. And then I'm going to let it cook a little bit longer before I add in the kale. So I'm going to go ahead and get that going. Give you a better angle of things. Any questions so far? All right. So you can see these are starting to brown quite nicely. I'm going to let these cook a little bit longer and turn up my heat just a smidge. But in the meantime, I'm going to season them so they soften nicely. In this recipe, you can use the chili powder or you can use some cinnamon to give it a little bit more of a warmer flavor. And then we want, you can add salt. If you feel like you have a diet that's already high in salt, you can omit it. I tend to run a lot and sweat a lot, so I'm going to add some salt. Here's some fresh cracked pepper. So black pepper actually has a lot of great antioxidant capacity, but if you're buying the pre-ground one, that antioxidant capacity is drastically reduced. So you really want to be able to grind your own pepper. It kind of goes for any seasoning in general. So if you can grind it, or if you have a mortar and pestle that you can incorporate, that's going to be a really great addition to your cooking repertoire. And then David, in case you're wondering, I like Himalayan salt or just regular sea salt. But it kind of depends on the flavor that you're looking for. So some salts have different flavors, different coarse textures. There's a great cookbook called Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, or there's also the show on Netflix, and she goes through different salt types like Maldon and the kosher salt, and it just is really dependent on the size of that flake for what you get with it. So I'm gonna let this cook a little bit more before we add this kale because they're still pretty firm, and I don't want to overcook my kale. So I'm gonna let that sit and roast for a little while longer, and then I'm gonna go ahead and get this oatmeal ready. So this oatmeal is very simple. I think the most daunting thing for people is the pomegranate and getting that prepared. So we're going to go through that together. Pomegranates are actually really easy to work with if you know how to cut them. So it took me a little bit to learn this, but it's very simple. I just slice off the ends, just like so. And then I tend to slice it a little bit conservatively so I don't crush the areas or slice through them. And then what you want to do is find the ridges here. You'll see there's little ridge lines where the pith kind of sticks out, and you just score it. So you're not slicing through it too much, but you're just scoring the outside. And so what we want to do is be able to break it apart here in a minute and just pop our seeds into it. So I'm going to get a little bowl. And so what's beautiful about adding fruit like this is not only are you getting a ton of red polyphenols, which is really imperative for that gut health. So the red polyphenols help to build up good bacteria, and limit the ability for bad bacteria to grow. So a lot like green tea has a very similar effect. Your pomegranates as well as tart cherries are going to be really great at regulating that gut microbiome. So especially this time of year, utilizing some deep reds and dark leafy greens in your meals is going to help to boost that nutrient density and support the gut microbiome. What's also nice about something like this is you're going to get a lot of vitamin C. There's actually going to be vitamin C in that squash as well. And we need vitamin C throughout the day. So typically when people think about vitamin C, they're like, okay, like I'll go and take like a supplement and I'll be good to go. While that's great, you know, we really want to focus on getting it from the diet throughout the day. So vitamin C is actually water soluble. And that's why you need it regularly. And it stimulates bone forming and supports that building of the bone matrix. So if you're not getting adequate vitamin C throughout your day from fruits or vegetables, it's going to be hard for your body to keep up with building and forming that bone. Just because you've hit your peak bone mineral density doesn't mean that that bone is static. So it's always kind of continuously rebuilding, reforming, and shape shifting, if you will. So you have, like we talked about with the blood, if there's imbalances in the blood, you're going to see that bone mineral density become compromised as it's trying to balance it out. So again, you know, you're having things ebb and flow in and out of the bone, and in and out of the bloodstream. Have you guys ever cut your pomegranate like this before? No. Yeah, so I just cut open the sides. Remember, I cut the sides off, scored it, and then this helps me open it up and just kind of pop all the areoles out, and you don't have to do the water bowl trick. I mean, you still can if you want. I don't at this point because it's very easy to get these out. Like I'm literally just kind of pawing at it and it's coming right out of the pith. Right now during this fall season is also a great way to a great time to get some labs done, especially if you tend to get sick during the winter. You really want to make sure that you're getting things like that vitamin D level checked. I would also have like zinc levels checked. You know, paying attention to your calcium status for bones. You can also have your magnesium checked in there. If you're really curious what your bone mineral density is, you can get a DEXA scan and set that up with your primary care and just see. Research has shown that people who walk regularly actually have higher bone mineral density in their hips, especially if they're going up hills. So that's a super simple way to help build that bone mineral density. But again, you know, the strength training or even weight bearing exercises like running can really help to build that bone mineral density. We see a lot of issues in men who only cycle. So some of the biggest disparities, sorry about that. We see a lot of stress fractures happen in men who are only cycling. Here, I'll show you all this action that's happening over here. So I'm just kind of turning this squash. You can see it's starting to brown a little bit. I'm going to go ahead and turn my heat down. It's starting to soften a bit, but I want it to get a little bit softer before I throw that kale in. Because again, I don't want to overcook my kale. You can, in some cases, cooking your food can actually bring out different nutrients, but I highly recommend having, you know, a balance of cooked foods and not cooked foods to really help to bring the most nutrients into your diet. So sometimes you get certain nutrients if it's raw. Other times you get more nutrients if it's cooked. So I think about like lycopene from cooked tomatoes and a tomato sauce, or beta carotene from these squash that we're cooking. So that's that vitamin A component in it. Okay, so finishing up these pomegranates here. I'm gonna get this oatmeal cooking as well. So in here I have a little bit of 2/3 cup of almond milk already. So I'm just gonna warm that up, and I'm gonna throw in my 1/3 cup of oatmeal. So you can do steel cut, roll, like steel cut, old fashioned. I say the closer to the whole grain form you can get, the better. Ideally, if you can do gluten-free, if you have a lot of sensitivities, I think that's great. Gluten tends to be a bit of an opportunistic issue for people. So if you have a lot of stress in your life, sometimes people will be more sensitive to gluten than normal. But if you're a pretty healthy person, you don't have a lot of digestive issues, a lot of times you can stand gluten without any problem. But you know, if you're having things kind of pop up a little bit more in your life, maybe your skin is off, your hair, nails, maybe you're feeling a little bit more brain fog or fatigue, work on reducing the gluten content in your diet, and a lot of times that can help. Oops. All right, so we have quite a few pomegranates going right now. Also for our pomegranates, so we have our oats that are cooking. I have almond milk in there. And then I have about a tablespoon of tahini. So tahini is made of sesame seeds. Sesame seeds are an excellent source of calcium. So whether you're doing tahini or sprinkling sesame seeds onto a dish, that's a great way to get a little bit more calcium into your diet. You can also do like ahi tuna encrusted in sesame seeds, like black or white. Both are really great. Black sesame seeds have a lot of antioxidant capacity as well. It's also great for antihistamine support. So if you have a lot of allergic reactions, that black sesame is one that you really want to hunt down and incorporate pretty regularly. All right. So I'm just bringing this oatmeal to a boil, and then we're going to go back and check on our squash here. It's smelling really good, by the way, like for those who are enjoying the cooking show from at home. So the squash is starting to get a little bit softer now. So I'm going to go ahead and add that kale in so we can get that cooking up nicely. There we go. All right.
Ellie, did you say you could use rutabaga as well as kale?
I would keep the kale in if you're focused on getting more calcium, because the kale is really where you're going to get that high calcium content, as well as the sesame seeds in this dish. But if you wanted to use rutabaga instead of butternut squash, you can. It might come out softer. Usually I'll use rutabaga in place of mashed potatoes for a lower carb option. And it's also higher in potassium. Well, potatoes are pretty high in potassium too.
Maybe in the wrong name. It was another green.
Acorn squash?
No, another leafy green instead of the kale.
Collards, cabbage, Swiss chard.
Swiss chard. That's what I had. I had that in the fridge.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you can definitely use Swiss chard in place of this. There's going to be a little bit of oxalate content in it, so you want to cook it pretty well. But when you cook those leafy greens that have the higher oxalate content, it's going to reduce the oxalates. So it kind of helps if you're having it just straight raw. Like let's say you do like a hummus wrap with Swiss chard, then you'll have a little bit more oxalate. But again, it's still really good for you at the end of the day. So kind of take it with a grain of salt, but watch the salt intake. All right, so I'm going to just stir this up so this kale gets down in there. I doubled this recipe, so if it looks like I have a bunch in there, it's because I do. My mom's visiting in town, so we're cooking up a bunch of things this week. It was exciting. And then it looks like my oatmeal is starting to bubble, so I'm gonna turn that down to a simmer so I don't curdle my almond milk. And speaking of alternative milks, I think it's amazing that we have so many different options from like hemp, almond, coconut. I literally have 3 different plant-based milks in my kitchen right now. But I think it's important to keep in mind, like if you're using that plant-based milk to increase the protein content in your diet, like almond milk only has like a gram of protein, so it's not going to do much for you. And most plant-based milks are essentially water that's been fortified. So bearing that in mind, you know, the natural calcium content of these products is going to be pretty low. So if you do utilize a plant-based milk, shake it up really good so that you have all that calcium that settles at the bottom, gets suspended. If you're not shaking your content super well, it's just going to sit at the bottom and you're just going to be pouring off flavored water. So big thing there. Alternatively, back onto plant-based options, if you're doing tofu, you want a calcium set tofu. So that means that it's been set with calcium salts, and you have to look at the label to be able to see if it's calcium set or magnesium set. If it's not calcium set, you won't have that higher calcium content that you would if it is. So tofu or soy products, a fermented soy product alone is not going to be high in calcium unless it's calcium set. So in this case, I have the Trader Joe's high protein organic tofu. It's magnesium set. So no, not a high content of calcium. It's only about 4%. We would need a lot more than that to be able to hit our goals. But if we wanted to incorporate that into this stir fry, we have the kale in there that's going to give us a nice boost of calcium. And this is going to help us meet our protein needs, which is going to continue to support that strong bone matrix. So it does have its place in the recipes if you want to incorporate it. Another thing that might be good is if you want to add some herbs to this, like parsley, oregano, basil. Those are also going to be great sources of vitamin K and some calcium to help boost that protein nutrient content. So I'm a big fan of, like, if I'm making a salad or something like that, how can we incorporate some fresh herbs to really make a nice pop in flavor, but also continue to boost the nutrient content of that. So as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, I want to make this butternut stir fry a little bit more of a meal style. So you could add in I have a chicken squash that I was considering adding in, but since in the oatmeal we're doing some yogurt with it, I wanted to keep this one plant-based. So I'm just going to add some white cannellini beans to this as we're stir frying it here. So you can see these kale leaves are starting to get a little wilty, and I'm going to let them go a bit longer. And give that a good stir. Sometimes it's nice to mash them a little bit so you have a little bit of a saucy feel to these. When it comes to reducing the degradation of your bone mineral density over time, the big things you really want to focus on is limiting excessive phosphorus intake in your diet. So if you drink soda, that's a big issue that we see of leaching calcium from the bone. So again, the body is going to strive to maintain that balance in the blood. Pardon the excessive glare we got going on today. So the body's going to want to maintain balance in your blood. And so if you're having a high intake of soda, this is going to have a really high amount of phosphorus in the diet, and that's going to leach calcium as well as magnesium from your bones to maintain that mineral balance in your bloodstream. So a lot of kids we're actually starting to see have really low bone mineral density from not only that high phosphate intake from soda content, but high salt intake from heavily processed foods. And in addition to that, low nutrient density from the diet. So oftentimes we're seeing young women not able to meet those calcium intakes also from compounding low energy availability, just from under eating a bit too much. So really helping to educate them on the importance of having adequate nutrition in their diet at that stage, particularly calcium, vitamin D, magnesium, potassium, and a high intake of fruits and vegetables, as well as particularly those leafy greens, is going to help to support that calcium intake and really maintain bone balance. And again, the sodium, soda, double whammy there is going to increase that acidity in the body, and your body's going to have to balance that out, whether it's excreting the calcium through the urine or, you know, leaching things from the bone to create that balance. And then last but not least, really high coffee intake or caffeine intake can leach calcium from the bone. So I highly recommend, if you're going to have coffee, add a little bit of a creamer in there, even if it's almond milk that's been that you shook really well, to have that calcium suspended in it. That can help to offset any imbalances that you might have compared to drinking just straight black coffee. So some things to think about there. Any questions on that? Okay, great. So it looks like our kale is almost done. I'm going to add some of our sesame seeds to it. So you can do raw sesame seeds, you can do toasted, you can have your black sesame seeds in here. But again, this is going to be another great boost of calcium to this dish. So we're just going to sprinkle it on, give you a good view of things here. We're just sprinkling on, and it looks so pretty. So this is definitely a dish that it's going to wow your guests. It's a great one to bring to parties this season. If you're looking for a healthy dish to bring, you're not really sure what's going to happen there. Very easy, transportable. You're not going to make a huge mess with things from something that's saucy. Going back to our oatmeal here. So this is almost done. If you want to really support your gut health, this is a great one to make ahead of time and then cool it off as a meal prep. And then you can reheat it as a later date. So that cooked and cool grain is going to help to coat the lining of your intestine and prevent anything from irritating it. So anything that gets a little bit gelatinous, like flaxseed, chia seed, aloe, is going to help to really protect that intestinal lining. You can also add flaxseed to this dish, which is a really great addition, more so for the high omega-3 content and increased amount of fiber in it. So if anybody ever has like constipation issues, just throw a tablespoon of flaxseed into your oatmeal in the morning, and that's really going to help to balance things out. All right, so this oatmeal is looking about done. I'm going to put it in a little bowl so it looks nice and cute for you guys. So normally I would just make two dishes of this, but we're following the directions today. So we got our oatmeal. So this oatmeal dish comes out to about 500 calories, 483 calories. It's got, woo, almost lost you there. It's got 27 grams of protein in it. About 17 grams of that is coming from our yogurt. But if you wanted a more plant-based one, you can still do the same dish. I would just add some hemp seeds or a little bit of a plant-based protein powder to help boost that up. We're just gonna mix in our tahini into here. And then if you wanna do a sweetener, you can do maple syrup, you could do a local honey. I really love blackstrap molasses these days, just for a little bit of a iron boost. Again, I mentioned I'm doing some runs these days, so that's kind of one thing that I'm focusing on a lot more with my nutrition. If you are bringing in that iron when you're doing a calcium, when you're focusing on a high calcium dish, you're going to inhibit the absorption of iron, but that calcium will take priority in your body. So we got our yogurt here. Oops. So we got our yogurt here. We got the pomegranate Oreos, and then we have some pistachios. And then some maple syrup if you want to drizzle that on top. Makes for a really great breakfast. So super simple one. You can easily meal prep ahead of time. You can find pomegranate Oreos that are already broken down and taken apart for you if you want to make that super simple. I kind of like the mindfulness of breaking them down myself. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. Do you have any questions before we get started? Massive.
Did you
guys
use it or anything, or you were just using it, just talking about it?
Did I use the what?
Ooh.
One more time.
Tofu.
Oh,
T-O.
I was just talking about it. Same with the sardines. If I wanted to get like super healthy, I like using sardines with like a banza pasta. I like kind of like the umami grounding flavor that it gives it. It's really great for after a hard workout and you're feeling a little bit sore, maybe your muscles are a little crunchy, if you will. I like bringing sardines in for that. Sometimes I'll do like ones that are in tomatoes. But for this kale dish, if you wanted to, I would pan sear that tofu. What I like about this Trader Joe's tofu is this one's almost pressed already, whereas some of them are just sitting in water. This one's still in a bit of water, but you don't have to press it as much. Usually if I'm pressing tofu, I'll wrap it up in a bunch of towels and then put a big book on it so it squishes out the extra juice. So that helps if you're putting it in a marinade or with a sauce, or you want more of like a crispy texture to your tofu to give it a little bit more palatability. A lot of people hate raw tofu, and I understand why. But if you pan fry it like that or oven bake it, it makes it really tasty.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? Cool. All right. Well, I will reach out to you all and put you into the portal so you can gain access to some of these recipes, as well as some of the meal plans. So there's a 1,600 and a 2,000 calorie meal plan. Feel free to use it directly as is or just as a guideline to help you build stronger bones. But again, some of the key factors really focus on high leafy green intake, 6 to 8 cups of vegetables per day, and incorporating a source of calcium with each meal, trying to hit around 500 milligrams. You can track it on MyFitnessPal and see, but it'll be about a rough estimation. And I'll send you over some notes based off of what we talked about today as well. All right. Thank you all
so
for
much.
joining. We'll be doing a Thanksgiving class later this month. So I'll send out some details on that for you guys to join in on as well.
Thank you so much,
Thank you.
Heather. I mean, I'm sorry.
Right.
Sorry
Bye.
about that. It was Eleanor, sorry about that. I was talking to over here. Bye.
Oh no, you're good. You're good. Totally good.
Sorry.
So,
Multitasking is not my best suit, I guess.
you
meetings.
tell me about that. It's hard.
Thank you so much. I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to see you next Thursday. Take care.
Yeah.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.